pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have an invocation this evening, Mr. Williams.
God grant us patience to work together. Let us not be rude or arrogant towards one another, but bring us together as a council as we do the work of our neighbors. I ask this in your holy name.
We have no remote electronic attendance. So we will move to roll call, please.
Alderman Williams. Macias.
Present.
Wentz.
Present.
Timian.
Present.
Moyer.
Present.
O'Brien.
Present.
Waldron.
Present.
Schmidt.
Present.
Pearson.
Questions on the agenda? None. We'll move to our public comment. Is there anyone here with public comment? There is not, but we do have one email public comment, and I will let the clerk read it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do have an emailed public comment from resident David Anderson, 3410 70th Street, Moline. I, David Anderson of Moline, Illinois, have had a lot of experience with Metronet installation and usage. In Davenport, Iowa, in front of my friend's home, an unknown and unnamed Metronet representative installed a fiber optic connection box on the ground on the wrong side of the sidewalk near the street. Metronet kept sending more workers to work on this box. Metronet also opened another hole in the ground on the house side of the sidewalk. Both of these were constantly reopened. Over a month, they failed to put up any form of danger warning, no orange cones, nothing. My friend started calling Metronet right away and for months later. I put up my personal orange cones because students use this area to and from school. After many days, they stole 2 of my unmarked cones and left the cone I had a company name on. My friend refused to call and ask for my cones back. I'm not a subscriber, so I'm unable to talk to Metronet. Every time they opened up either of the holes in the ground, they filled in with the worst dirt I've ever seen, white powder with rocks in it. My friend again called them for months to fix the dirt they claimed was dirt. They replaced it many times, getting worse every time. I even found huge rocks like my fist buried. I've worked on dirt sod since 1971. My uncle owned a sod farm. It's almost impossible to put down this rock mix accidentally. When my friend called Metronet, they kept coming back after a week or 2 and making it worse over and over. Right now, I have replaced the dirt 3 times, and only some of the grass will now grow. I will dig down a few feet and replace it with a lot of new bagged special dirt. Metronet even claimed that they were not responsible. Their name is on the connection box. It is their fiber cable. They claim that they hired people who install their cable, and they are responsible. Who was responsible? They did not know. No one. All around the neighborhood for years, they installed Metronet boxes in the ground. All of them were surrounded by white, dead dirt with rocks. The soil used to be very fertile farm soil. When they finished with all the rich people's houses, they moved backward to a huge apartment complex. They again put in boxes and put in white, dead dirt with rocks all over the complex. They even put in new sidewalk, wet concrete. They did not mark it as not to walk to the post office. I noticed Metronet vans parked in the most obtuse manner. There were men on scaffolds or something all over, wires all over, and it scared me horribly. This was as dangerous as I had ever witnessed. No cones, no construction tape, nothing. I owned both of them and used them. They're looking and walking back and forth, as if they were lost. When they saw people walking toward them, they did nothing except stare at them, as if to intimidate them or something. People avoided them, luckily. I thought I must film this, call the police, file a report, anything. Yet thought surely someone else must be adult and responsible enough to report this. I was wrong. What I witnessed happened in other areas, so much I forgot where. Some places had official Metronet trucks marked. Some had no names on anything, and some had a mix of both. Never was there any safety measures taken, never. My friend called Metronet for over a month, over and over. Only after threatening to cancel her subscription and tell her neighbors did they do a very little amount of work, which was still horrible. She gave up. Metronet also messed up under the street in front of my friend. They had improperly installed cable under the road, and it had to be dug up 2 places, huge chunks. Again, while it was being fixed, there was very little signage, little to show huge holes in the road. Only one side was open, and this was at an almost blind corner from one direction. I took pictures of all of this, and a neighbor asked why I was filming. Now I know what to tell him. Most mature adults find this perplexing, unnatural, unheard of. I deleted the pictures. It seems silly. Years later, MetroNet service is so super expensive, my friend will cancel part of her subscription. She will keep the internet and lose the TV part. The federal government is paying $30 a month to poor people to pay for internet service. I have this service. Mediacom, the only service I can obtain, is absolutely horrible to deal with, even with the $30 paid. I had severe trouble getting an honest price. My billing was incorrect every month because the bill came before the government's $30 was applied. When I wanted to get my own modem and router, it was horrible. The list of modems was out of date, not complete, and not able to cut and paste on a website to find it online. I spent months studying this. I bought one on the list only to find out it was a modem and had no router. The router runs the Wi-Fi. It would be expensive, too expensive put together. I went online, Amazon, and figured out which one would work myself. It was rebuilt modem and router, both in one, cheap. It was also good for the future requirements, so it was future-proof. It looked so much better than the modem I rented from Mediacom. Now, a year later, my $30 internet bill has blown up to $70 a month for my plan. The government stated that most internet providers will provide $30 internet service for poor people. Mediacom was listed as a company that agreed. I cannot find it. If you can find it, you're smarter than I am, or it changed since I looked. In conclusion, MetroNet is the worst company when installing anything. They'll do the most dangerous, horrible, illegal acts and claim they are not responsible. Mediacom is severely difficult to deal with, yet the only company many of us can use.
Thank you very much. We will move to our roundtable discussion now. We're starting with broadband. Mr. Luton.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council, welcome to staff. We're all here. On the line with us tonight, we have David Talbot, who you met before several weeks ago. Recommendation that by vendors. Welcome, David, and good evening to you.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. Love to be able to see you. Voice works great. So, anyhow, I asked David go ahead and be with us tonight. Kind of bring us up to date on what transpired since our last meeting and what leads them to their conclusion of July 18th, yesterday, with the city going forward with the broadband spectrum. So, Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you, and if you be available for questions and answers, that would be great.
Certainly. Again, it's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Just to re-identify myself, my name is Dave Talbot. I'm the Director of Research Services at CTC Technology and Energy. We are a consultancy who works for the public sector and nonprofit sectors. We do not work for ISPs, vendors, construction contractors involved in this sort of, we work with IQ. As you know, the RFP went out and you had 5 proposals initially, including one that was everything you asked for and no requested contribution, which was Windstream. Behind that, in terms of the only other company requesting no contribution was MetroNet, but they were proposing to build aerially. So our recommendation last time was to proceed to negotiations with both Windstream and MetroNet to see how we could refine those proposals and clarify some things. During that process, before we got to even negotiating, we got an email from Windstream saying they were actually dropping out of the process, citing changing market conditions. We tried several times to engage them again, including as recently as a week ago, following some follow-up guidance that we provided to the vendors that we would welcome aerial proposals just to see what all these numbers might be if everybody had a chance to propose aerially. And even with that, Windstream declined to get back in. So this review was for bidders, as you know, MetroNet, Geneseo or GTI, AT&T or Mediacom. the clarification email I alluded to a minute ago, on June 29th at Bob's direction, given that, some people replied with all aerial, some replied all underground or virtually all, and some were sort of in the middle. We wanted to make sure we had apples and apples, either whether that be underground, which is of course the preference in Moline, or aerial, so that you really knew what had comparative. So we asked everybody to please come back and say, okay, if you bid aerial, let's see what it would be for underground. If you bid underground, let's see what it would be for aerial. And as I mentioned, Windstream still didn't come back. Metronet basically stayed where they were with some clarifications in a letter that responded to certain questions the city had. And then Geneseo, AT&T, and Mediacom all declined to change or add any revisions to their original proposal. So that process was a good process to have, just to see if we could beat the bushes a little bit more on what might come back. But now what we have is basically the same 4 proposals, not 5, that you had back in May. So that's where we are. And so, stepping back, the president of our company is Joanne Obis, and I talked to her this morning. And, the perspective she provides, having done this kind of work for a couple of decades, is that, what the city of Moline has on the table are actually pretty good options relative to what we've seen in other cities, and even relative to what we might have seen a couple or 3 years ago. In that you have somebody proposing to build fiber premises at no cost to you, and you have another provider proposing fiber premises, giving you your undergrounding, which you had requested, but at a fairly sizable cost to the city. I say sizable of $10 million, but it does cost a lot to build that way. So it's not, we haven't evaluated what the construction costs are, but the number is not particularly surprising. So you have, you have these 2 options. We did not regard, obviously, the Mediacom proposal, given that they are the incumbent and that they're also requesting $22 million, is not realistic. And then we also don't recommend the AT&T proposal, given the requested price tag of $15-odd million, and then you don't even get the undergrounding. So you're basically left with these two players. And really, it comes down to the way we see it as a policy choice on the part of the city. Metronet is a very good option for you. It's a solid company presenting low risk. They have delivered in other cities as promised. So if the priority is to reduce or indeed have no requested financial contribution from the city, Metronet is a very good option for you. And if not having to pay anything up front is of paramount importance, then we would recommend proceeding to negotiations with them to sharpen up and get to a term sheet. On the other hand, if your priority as a city is that underground construction is the single most important thing that must be had and must be pursued, then as you know, you have the Geneseo or PCI, which is a solid company, a local company, not quite as experienced, but a solid company, and that they are a good option for pursuing if undergrounding is really the only way you want to go. Both have essentially, this is another area where we would want to sharpen up in a term sheet the commitment to ubiquitous construction on the part of either company. So there would still be a process of negotiation from here to get to a term sheet, which is the sort of the framework of a contract, which then gets sent to the lawyers to turn into an actual contract. So that's about the size. There are some other differences around the edges. Metronet is proposing to build this inside of a year. Geneseo is 2 years. Both are saying they'll do the ACP $30 subscription, but Geneseo is saying that they would, and that this hasn't changed as far as I know, that they would expect the city to pick up that $30 subsidy if the federal dollars run out. They're expected to run out in somewhere from 2 to 5 years, depending how quickly the ACP money gets spent. So I'm sort of talking a lot here. I'll stop here. That is basically where we are, and it's like I say, it's sort of a policy decision on the part of the city right now. Happy to. Yep.
I think he summed it up really well. The only thing I might add, David,
I neglected to touch on that. I can briefly if you'd like me to.
Be good.
So the city, as part of the RFP, had this fairly sizable request for fiber to be brought to, I believe it was 600 sites, signal. And what came back from these two companies was not quite that. There were different ideas or different approaches. Geneseo is proposing to bring and give you the 6 strands as requested to handholds, which are the access points at the ground level. At many, I believe they said nearly all intersections. I have to go look up the exact language, but and then Metronet did not offer you fiber, but said that it would provide you the equivalent in services, meaning a turnkey approach where you would pay them a fee to run to have service to the sites that you wish to have service to. In neither case do we know it would require another engineering review to determine the value of these two approaches. It is good to own fiber, but it's not like that means there isn't cost associated with once you have fiber at the handhold, you need to do more work and then you have to operate it. So comparing those would require another level of review to understand and refine in a term sheet what those would be. So that's the high level on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're at the point where we need to provide direction to the city administrator. I see a hand. Mr. Warren.
Two questions. One, just for clarification, I know like on the 28th, we had given direction to staff, and it's a 6-2 vote, to go back and tell them, we're going to hold firm, we're not going to go aerial, to get responses back from Windstream, from the others, to see if that would reduce their bid back, maybe get Windstream back to the table. I know last week, Bob, you said we made a mistake. We actually communicated the exact opposite to all of them. Once we realized that mistake, have we gone back to Windstream and actually communicated? Because from what he said was, we're still communicating to them about the aerial approach.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I can address that. Yes, we very much did. We very specifically requested to Windstream to come back with an aerial assumption because they had replied initially saying they would do underground. Then, as you know, they just withdrew citing economic conditions. I went back in the email very specifically asked them to come back and say, hey, the city would be interested in looking at an aerial proposal or any other changes there too. And it was actually, and I kept emailing him, and it was actually Friday the 15th when I got the final no back from Windstream that they're not coming back to the table with any changes or any proposal. That was one chased down very thoroughly and concluded.
Yeah, that was at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. They actually submitted their final rejection and they were walking away from the table. But we weren't the only community with that. Some of the clients that were people from the streams at the table, they also walked away. And those who felt that the offer on the table was too rich, we probably saw all the other offers that came in, and recognized that corporate level that, they probably put it too deep into what was happening and saying. So,
I got a quick, Jake, does this feel like this is the exact opposite of what we voted on?
Could you clarify something? How would yeah, and they were already 100% underground, so how would the sticking to underground have changed their proposal?
You want to answer this? I feel like I'm the one that keeps talking about this, but I feel like I'm being gaslighted. Like I am. We talked and agreed to something, and now.
Look, I chased it down, and I looked at it, and it got communicated out to those vendors based on what was spoken. But we did not talk about then going back and that cat was out of the bag at that point. I think it was a pipe dream to begin with, but a 2-week pipe dream I said finally roll on. And I think we had we had already moved on to that point. Once we've already opened that door, we're trying to cram it back in
I don't
after last week's meeting, I think would have been more futility.
I don't necessarily disagree with you,
So then
but
why
I,
are we relitigating? I think
Excuse
we
me,
talked about it last
Mr. Schmidt has the floor, so if you raise your hand, I see a hand over here.
I think we've talked about this, like I mentioned, ago since 2019, for all intents and purposes. We need to make a policy decision. That's what we're here for, a policy decision. And breaking down what our consultants told us, Bob has told us, the staff has told us that we need underground, or we need to go area. We know that underground has a minimum $10 million cost, and aerial does not. And I think it's time that we as policymakers have a vote that we want to stay underground, we want to do it as a variance to give this, or do we want to change the ordinance? I'm not sure which way you want to advise us to go, Margaret. What I would like to do now to move this along is make a motion to not follow our ordinance reference burying it underground, either through a variance or change the ordinance, and go with aerial option instead of the mandated underground.
Motion by Alderman Holt and seconded by Alderman Kane. Discussion. Yes, Mr.
one of the things that we talked about last week, I know the mayor was going to do a public outreach for input and advertise all over. Can you report back to us what your findings were of that public hearing?
Yes,
Or that public-
as I mentioned to you on the phone, Dave, the sentiment is just bring us someone besides MediaCom. They also, as you know, the recording of the session was out yesterday, so I'm sure you had a chance to look at it. There were plenty of people there that understood underground to be very helpful, and they wanted to pursue that. There were also people there who said, you all have been working with these ideas for much longer than me or I, and so they trusted whatever the council decided to do. So there were a variety of sentiments, and that's the summary.
There was also a news article, and WQAD, I believe, covered the event. And I went through the 300 plus comments on Facebook. If we had something like that city, we could aggregate it. It's a different story. The overwhelming sentiment, and it's interesting, the story itself mentioned aerial versus underground. Not a single comment said anything about that. All that they said is we want an alternative. We want something else. No one had a lick to say about buried versus aerial.
So I've been reaching out for the last few years. People have been emailing me, and I reached back and talked to several of those people. Had conversations with a few of you about those things. And I've talked to a number of other people face to face who, and without exception, they have horror stories, as that article was the council earlier stated. That Metronet is a terrible company to work with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone they know in Davenport, pizza, et cetera, they all want their they're willing to pay the extra. It's all I keep.
And I took a look at a lot of those, and I agree with you. A lot of people want alternatives, and I think that's what we've been trying to work for. We've been trying to find the right one. And I guess to Alderman Moyer's point, if you go through a lot of those, I found that there were some that did like Metronet, but it was probably about a 3-to-1 ratio of complaints about issues that they had with them versus people who had said. So I'm not saying that nobody wanted it, but when you got into people who actually had some kind of interaction or had them installing stuff on their property or going through the area or whatever, it was about, I think, 27 of them, so about a 3-to-1 when I kind of tallied it up. But and I did the same thing. Went around and talked with a number of people. Comments that were brought up were the straight line wins, the ratio, the things that had popped up that people were without power for a week and those sorts of things. I think during that period of time, I think MediaCom was out in some areas for well over a month, and people couldn't get internet service. And so there was a lot of people that talked about, yes, this is an investment, but it would also differentiate us from all of our neighbors. That, hey, we have an infrastructure that is derecho, straight line, nothing's proof, but that will be up and running in Moline when others get knocked offline and those sorts of things. And so that was a lot of the communication. I agree. There was a number of them that said, just give it to me as fast as we can. One thing that I think we did is there is a difference between a year and 2 years. But one of the things we had talked about, I think they were going to do, even with the 2 year, that they were going to kind of install in quadrants. And so people were going to be coming online basically as they came through. And I think, depending on, I still think that we should go back to Windstream. And to your point about the cat out of the bag or whatever, if you're talking about finance and those sorts of things, if you think that you're going to have to compete against somebody who can string line for a tenth of the price and then compete with them in a community versus assurances that says, hey, anybody who's going to have to come and compete with you has got to take on the same investment that you do, that may be enough for a place like Windstream to come back. I still think that if we decide on the very approach, we should still reach out that avenue just in case. It may not happen, but I think it is worth it for $10 million because yeah, who knows, maybe they
For the record, I'm a big advocate of burying everything. I think everything should be buried. But burying one utility and not the others doesn't make any sense. It's like having one new tire and 3 bolt tires. Doesn't do any good, right? So derecho knocks out the power. What powers the internet? It's the same utility that we're losing. And you can't use your modem without electricity to your house anyway. So if we really want underground, we need to put everything in. And I don't think this isn't the project to do that. We need to start by getting the service set up, and if we want to have a serious discussion, putting everything underground. We could do that. That's a 10-year project, probably $40+ million. And so I don't know if that's a high enough priority at the moment, but right now the highest priority is getting alternative to MediaCom. And that's why I go for primacy as soon as we can.
You also got to consider it's the internet. It's not electricity. It's not your water. People can go a few days without it. Those things happen. And $10 million should be better put to use in other projects. Not long ago, we looked at a lot of maintenance that needs to happen in this building, new fire station coming down the line. There's a lot of priorities that I think this one could be better spent on. So just the bottom line, I really want to see $10 million spent on one company to bury it. To me, it's a luxury. And I think we have other projects that are priority. And for that reason, I'm going to side with Alderman Walker. We need to expedite this and get things going. People have been waiting too long.
Yeah, since I see this in front of us and brought up the $1 million price tag, should we talk on this farm? Would you mind walking us through the financing options document here?
That was pretty straightforward, but I'll read it into the record so we can have it. Essentially, back last summer when we started to allocate our broadband financing, we set $7 million specifically for city-related costs for broadband, $1 million. Rather than the campaign budgeted, right now there's probably $2 million available in general fund reserve. Again, it's subject to the amendments that we're looking at now. Our costs have gone up about 20% on all of the projects that we're looking at. So when we get through that process, we're not going to know that exactly. That's probably what it is. service impact commission funds is about $546,700. It's a $7 million net bond proceeds, 20-year term. Norm, which is responsible about 4%, which you know, pension costs are going up. We can't control that, so it's going to start to restrict our spending. Capital, do all of that. This is no exception. As you know, last year, the council voted to overlay levy rate, and that rate went lower right now. It's 2022, that penny is equal to $79,037, which is equivalent to 0.069. The rate that would be added to the rate is almost equivalent to what the local government. Not exactly, a little less, but it's pretty close. At the end of the day, we did receive no over bonding underground but the rate was 1.947, like by the 0.669, we have 2.012, and you recall, I think we're at 2.0177, so it's fractional, very fractional. So it is basically back to the state is going to say, without knowing what the growth is equal to sense value of the community.
Thanks.
And to Alderman Tinian's point, I couldn't agree with him more. I mean, that's kind of why I had said earlier about tightening things up to try to move things to go underground more and those sorts of things. But if you don't start, it will never happen. I did, and I appreciate, this approach of doing it via the levy, but, and that's why I wish we would have gotten these materials ahead of time so we could review them and talk. But there has been other communities that have done this by adding a user fee on those who subscribe. And you do it on this, you do it on the Mid-American, you do it on a couple of other things, but what you do is you then allocate those funds for the burying of the infrastructure. And so, yes, it may take 10 years, it may take 15 years, but you do it in such a way that those things sunset once you get it done. But we have an opportunity here, if that's the route we want to go, that we could change the face of Moline for our children. Might be 15 years from now, 20 years, and we have to work out what the numbers are to be able to do that. But could you imagine if the vast majority of Moline was eventually buried? I mean, it would set us apart from our neighboring communities. It would make us, to your point, I agree with you that just having one doesn't solve it, but until you do one, you're never going to get them all. And it's just going to be that much more expensive down the road if you don't start at some. And so I think that you also have this other issue, like for instance, we've got a project right now that last I had heard, the Safe Routes to School project, there's a pole there that has MetroNet on it. We're still waiting for them to move their stuff off of that pole to another pole so that we can actually put in the APA ramp and continue that project. The less things we have up, the less issues we have on construction projects and delays because a provider is non-responsive or hasn't given you a time frame for moving
Well,
Uh,
I'll ask Mr. Dryer to clarify the answer to the question about that. I know you sent it today or yesterday about that.
Yeah, they're very powerful that MetroNet is on it and asked to relocate to Newport, and they said they would do that. They still have not done. The contractor is still able to work. It's just a guide wire over in that pole. Having been doing construction for a number of years too,
just, as much as we talk about the whole city being buried, which means all utilities being buried, very different.
Thanks for the clarification.
That is its own project. And we benefit from scale if we do everything at once versus piecemeal. And so by doing one utility now, I know it sets a precedent, but the cost goes up exponentially if we do them one at a time. So if that's something this council wants, which I agree with, it needs to be approached separately, not as a part of fiber. It needs to be, everything's getting buried, we're gonna have a plan with the engineering department, bit by bit over time, not as a, so I really want to segment the two conversations.
I have been also trying to seek and talk to every person I could. I was in attendance at the meeting, and I mean, almost always you hear, well, do you want area buried? Buried. Of course we want buried. Of course I want buried. But then when you hit the price tag, I get a completely different story. And for me, it's been 80 to 90% saying, don't by any means spend $10 million on this. And that is reaching out to people who emailed me in the past year, reaching out to people in the community who I know, just if I talk to someone, hey, you Moline resident, just because it's a big choice, and I think that it's out there. I just think we have to look at the projects in front of us and look at the other items and say whether it's worth it. And in my mind, it is not worth carrying it. I don't think we get enough benefit or ownership in the final product for me to be able to sign off on putting that level of funding. I do think we could find other options for financing besides raising the tax levy. I appreciate that point, but I just not interested in pursuing that.
Well,
Like I mentioned earlier, we've been at this for 2019. I think we understand the issues here, and I'd like to call the question.
Okay.
Question's been called. The motion was by Alderman Waldron, seconded by Alderman Timmy. Sophie, please restate your motion.
What motion?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, the question's been called. The motion is, could you read it out, please?
Oh, sure. The motion was, Alderman Waldron, seconded by Alderman Timian, moved to not follow the ordinance either by variance or amendment and allow above ground installation.
Yes.
Just so everybody knows, the vote right now is to close the debate,
Yes, that's correct.
not
All right. Roll call.
Alderman Williams? Macias? Went?
nay.
Timian?
Aye.
Moyer? O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Okay.
5 ayes, 3 nays.
Debate is closed. Now the motion to be voted on. Please repeat it one more time, just so it's very.
Sure. Alderman Waldron, seconded by Alderman Timian, moved to not follow the ordinance either by variance or amendment and allow above ground installation.
With this, is this just, I just want to make sure we're understanding what the scope of this is. Is this just for one particular vendor? Is this for anything that has to do with broadband? Is this anything, and that we're just not going to follow our code at all? Or is it just the feasibility requirement for underground?
Hang on 1 second. Just so we're clear. Debate is closed, but we need some clarification on what his motion is. If he needs to amend it, we will go.
You basically maybe decide the policy first. Are we going up? Are we going down? So for me at this point, it's just that. And after I think we made that determination, we would be better. So all broadband.
Would you like to amend your motion to include your clarification on broadband? Sure. That it applies to broadband. Say the amendment.
That includes all broadband.
Point of inquiry.
Yes. So debate is closed, clarity's been given, but you might need to do it. Or could you? All the questions fix all. We have to vote on the question that's been called, and any further clarifications will have to come in the form of motions.
Oh, there, and you can amend it, yeah, the
Got
Oh, we already voted on the question, you're saying we have
Yes.
to take
Right.
a vote on this
Correct.
and then.
take this
Got it.
vote and then.
Okay, so we'll take this vote, roll call on this.
Okay, Alderman Williams? Macias? Wentz?
Nay.
Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Nay.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Walton?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Aye.
5 ayes, 3 nays.
I think it would be beneficial for Mr. Walden to clarify the motion further, other motions, so that we get the exact right meaning.
Well, I'll defer to Alderman Wynn's judgment on what I need to amend. At this point, I think we've decided that we'll allow broadband on area. We made a policy decision that will give the staff either go with a variance or modify the existing ordinance.
You're gonna make a motion for reconsideration.
There's, we have to have a second for reconsideration.
Have we changed, seeing as that come into effect? The changes we made on number 2 is 10 days after, or
It was put in effect last week.
Yeah.
is it 10 days after reading? Or is it 10 days after the second reading was published, or is it in effect right now?
Oh, no, it goes into effect immediately.
Okay, then I'll second that.
Alright, so we're reconsidering the motions that we just voted on, or sorry, that's the motion on the table. Yes?
Discussion with that.
Yeah.
I think we closed it a little too early. I think we might need to take a look back at some of the other things. I understand that trying to close it, but the motion was made quite broad and difficult to interpret. Yeah, I want to make some improvements.
I would say we can get Google's opinion on variance versus, in the further discussion. Any further discussion on this consideration?
I guess to that point, I mean, can you read what the motion was again?
Sure. Alderman Waldron, seconded by Alderman Timian, moved to not follow the ordinance either by variance or amendment and allow above ground installation.
And so I guess the ordinance, I mean, like, what the heck are we talking about? Are we talking about chapter 6? I understand, I think, what you're trying to accomplish, but that's not what we voted on.
Well, that's what we're doing. Thank you for the point. We're just trying to clarify what you really wanted to say. If it's specific to broadband, and if it's variance or by amending. So, more clear. Yes.
Well, I'm not supporting this. I think what you should probably do is to direct this to staff to come back with what you're trying to accomplish, and then we'll talk about that. So they actually give us, it is directed to exactly what we're trying to accomplish, not, we're just not gonna follow the ordinance.
Ms. Stoples.
So I think Alderman Waldron, you're looking for a broader policy decision. And, you know, maybe it is true, I would agree that the motion is voted on may lack some clarity. But to direct staff to come back with something then defeats Alderman Waldron's purpose of creating or reaching a policy decision. So I would encourage you to look at how you could properly make a motion that would clarify that.
What is your guidance on a variance versus the overall ordinance change?
Initial,
Is that out of order for conversation regarding a vote for consideration?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's not specific. Thank you. Here, Mr. Did you ever hand up?
Just what, on the
Okay. So this, we're still in the reconsideration. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call please.
Alderman Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
O'Brien. Walden.
Hey.
Sorry, Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you. 7 ayes, 1 nay.
Okay.
Your Honor, I make a motion to strike the entirety of the previous motion to say that we, the council, approve the building of a variance, negotiating, pardon me. We, the council, approve the negotiating of a variance in a component of negotiating a contract with a service provider installing above ground internet service.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Council approves seeking details for a variance with an internet service provider of installing aerial.
Wait, I didn't follow you. So, Alderman Schmidt has motioned to negotiate a variance for installing aerially. Is there a second?
I'm sorry, did you ask for a variance to chapter 6? And we want that clarification in there?
Mr. Schmidt, would you like to clarify if this related to chapter 6?
I am fine with that clarification.
Your second.
No second.
Seconded by Alderman Timian. Okay. Any further discussion? Yes.
I think we had talked about that conversation of having a variance as opposed to permanently altering the code. And I am very much in favor of the variance situation, not looking to permanently alter the code. I think that there's still a benefit, and if we find ourselves in a situation where variance is called for, that we can deal with that at that time. I'm not just saying let's open that all the way back. I think for this project, I know for this project, I am in favor of that. That's where I stand.
Question on this motion, this delay us making a policy decision for everything. Okay, do we end up hiring?
I don't believe so, because if
Says
you're
it's sending
voting,
it back
if you-
to staff again for a week
No.
to do it.
because if you're voting for a variance, then you can vote for the person that provides that. Okay, any further questions or discussion, Mr. Wayne?
I guess, first, a point of clarification. When we say negotiate, who are we negotiating the variance?
Yes, Mr. Wayne.
What I'm intending, what I'm accomplishing, to clarify, is to allow us to negotiate a variance as part of the contract. Understanding that would fall there. I'm sensing that maybe it does not fall there.
So I believe that you would vote to give a variance under chapter 6, and then negotiate with a service provider to install aerial, or to make aerial installation of broadband services in the city.
So in a sense, you're saying they're two separate ideas.
So you would need the variance under chapter 6 to to effectuate your policy decision to install aerially. So I think you want to combine those two. Which I think,
as we move forward with that, is this, so you're saying it's better served as a single motion covering on guidance of proving that there would be a variance and negotiating the contract and one motion?
I guess that's how I envision it, because it brings both elements together. Which, so to effectuate the aerial installation or to even negotiate for a contract for that, you would have to agree that you would grant that variance.
Make a motion to take with the intention of starting to keep it clean.
How about you just withdraw your motion?
I make a motion to take.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Alderman Moline. Discussion. No, there's no discussion. Roll call.
Alderman Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Nay.
Wentz.
Aye.
Timian. Ware.
Nay.
O'Brien.
Nay.
Waldron.
Nay.
Schmidt.
Aye.
4 ayes, 4 nays.
Nay.
And that
Whatever,
motion
withdraw my
carries.
amendment.
Yes.
Withdraw my motion. I make a motion to strike through some proposed language and replace it with direct staff to negotiate with MetroNet as an internet service provider and to include in that process the required variance to Chapter 6 to approve that contract. Second.
Motion by Alderman Schmidt, seconded by Alderman Waldron. Discussion.
Can we recap where we're at?
Yeah,
with this?
first we had some unclear motion, Alderman Duke's scope. Why, yes, there you go.
I know you're trying to account.
As a group without, that was done. Am I saying that right?
Reconsider.
Reconsidered, yes. And then, Mr. Schmidt attempted to clarify the intent there
By striking it.
by striking the entire thing and then tried to table that. That did not, proceed, it did not pass, and so now Mr. Schmidt is making a motion with further clarity. And if you could
It was
please,
another strike.
Oh,
it was strike and replace,
with,
yes. Can you please read it?
okay, perfect. I didn't know if it was in addition to or.
Yeah, no.
Alderman Schmidt, seconded by Alderman Waldron, yes, that's correct. Move to withdraw the motion, replace with a motion to direct staff to negotiate with MetroNet and grant variance to Chapter 6 to accomplish this.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Do we have the authority in the ordinance to do a variance in Chapter 6 for this reason? I mean, there's 1120 is the variance section, and it says the city council may authorize a variance only if, so it's got restricting language on when and why we can.
Sorry, what was that left?
1120. So I think
Legal counsel is looking at it. Talk about it yet?
I just don't want to vote on something that then is not.
So it does, require that the council may authorize a variance under the more conditions not under their control. And they would relate back to that sub paragraph F, I believe. Create a special hardship that would make enforcement of the provision unreasonable, given the public purpose to be achieved by the provision. Number two, all other designs, methods, materials, locations, or facilities that would conform with the provision are impracticable in relation to the requested approach.
I just,
But it's okay, you're okay. Miss,
Is a condition for authorizing the variance. The city council may require the utility requesting the variance to meet reasonable standards and conditions that may or may not be expressly contained within the article, which carry out the purpose of the article. So, I believe the record reflects from your discussion today, it does say that the utility requesting the variance is demonstrated two items. Which they have not. They, not that they could not, but they have.
so question about it, the way this is worded, and please correct me if I wrote it down wrong. Direct staff to negotiate with MetroNet as an internet service provider and include variance to accomplish this. So this motion refers to it being a part of negotiations, not that we are granting the variance right at this moment. Is that a proper understanding?
That would be a proper understanding of the motion.
Anyone? Mr. Wynn?
I think I understand what you're saying, but that's not what the motion says. I mean, if your motion is that to negotiate and indicate to them that we are open to a variance if they meet the qualifications, that makes sense. But the thing is to negotiate, have a variance is different. It doesn't overcome. I mean, the other option, and again, but I'm trying to get us to the right spot. You know, I mean, we can always, I think with super majority, we can just say this doesn't apply.
Mr. Macias?
Question, well, and if we're negotiating, can we tell them to ask for the variance?
Right,
Exactly.
so,
We can take care of it during negotiations.
Yeah, but I would just not address the variance issue in the motion. We all know that the issue is.
I agree. I just don't want us to do things that.
I appreciate that. More than both.
No, I know. I'm with you.
All right, Ms. Gustavo.
so you could also say that you would consider a variance.
Would you like to amend your motion in any way? Is that a no? Yes.
The legal counsel is advised not to pass the amendment as written, right? I would withdraw the motion, and I'm not gonna try again. But I think.
All right, so he would like to withdraw the motion. Someone remind me.
So, the clerk has, suggested first.
I think it's just a matter of replacing one word instead of grant would be considered, so it would be, replace with a motion to direct staff to negotiate with MetroNet for broadband internet service and consider a variance to chapter 6 to accomplish this.
Staff will say CPC, that stands for.
Okay, well, Alderman would have to make this motion.
Right.
I would think.
Sure,
You want to read
O'Brien
it back to me, so I.
O'Brien is
I'll get
making
around
that
when I make
motion.
a
Could you please read it back?
Sure.
It's that.
Just replacing staff with CPC, that's okay, to do the whole.
No, you have to say he's, no, you're not saying. Striking all previous motions and replacing with.
Okay.
That's-
Motion to direct CTC to negotiate with MetroNet for broadband internet service and consider a variance to chapter 6 to accomplish this.
Second.
Second by Alderman Waldron. Discussion. Discuss. All right, hearing none, roll call please.
Alderman Williams. Macias.
Aye.
Wentz.
Nay.
Timian.
Aye.
Moyer.
Nay.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
5 ayes, 3 nays.
Thank you.
Point of-
Yes.
Is this, did we vote on the amendment, not on the final motion? Because it was reconsidered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was striking all previous.
Yeah.
You are correct, you voted on remaking the amendment.
Not the actual reconsideration. I mean, we voted to reconsider, but now we need to vote on the final.
Yeah.
As amended motion.
Well, both were withdrawn.
Yeah, they were all-
Back to the original reconsidered motion.
And then he struck, what we just did was to strike and replace,
And then he withdrew again. And then Alderman O'Brien made his motion.
which is
Which
to
was
strike and
replace
replace.
with this, so.
We just voted to strike and replace. I probably should have voted yes.
Probably shouldn't have voted to strike and replace if he'd already withdrawn the motion.
You withdrew it, but then O'Brien made the motion.
Oh, I thought he had withdrawn
Ms.
twice.
Christopoulos, please clarify.
Actually, the motion that Alderman O'Brien made, which you read, did not include the strike and replace.
I make a motion to strike and replace the original we had over here. That motion, replace it. And go all the way back to Baldwin.
I suggested, before you read it off, I said striking all previous motions.
Yeah.
That's what he said yes to. So reading that off, it should have been striking all previous motions.
That's your point of clarification.
So how do we correct this?
So I make a motion to strike all previous motions.
And
Replace it.
replace it with,
Motion, I thought we just voted.
So strike out previous motions and replace with motion to direct CTC to negotiate with MetroNet for broadband internet service, and consider a variance to chapter 6 to accomplish this.
That's motion. Second.
I'm sorry,
motion by Alderman O'Brien, seconded by Alderman Waldron. Any discussion? We are clear that this is the final version of this.
Yes, but this is a vote to amend the original motion, this is not the final vote.
Yeah, it was to strike and replace.
back to the point where it had been called for reconsideration. This is a vote on an amendment to the original.
Okay. That may be true, but you, in between, there was a table between.
Yeah, that's right.
So we were still.
Well, it wouldn't hurt to, so, yeah. So, then this,
And then go back to the roll call.
Alderman Williams. Macias. Went.
Nay.
Timian.
Aye.
Moyer. O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
5 ayes, 3 nays.
Okay, now we're back to the original. Which,
The motion is reconsidered.
Yeah, so
As amended.
it has already been voted and reconsidered. This is now to call the vote here.
This is,
When discussion ends, we vote on it.
yes, yes. You need it reread.
right. So, the motion now on the manual part.
So you've read it 4 times, which should be the last time.
All right.
That's right.
I'm not kidding.
Got it. So the motion is to direct CTC to negotiate MetroNet with MetroNet for broadband internet service and consider a variance to chapter 6 to accomplish this.
I'll make.
Motion has been
it's already on the floor.
Well,
Oh, yeah, that, we were just reading it so that we could then take the vote. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Okay. Hearing, yes.
So I understand where we can start out with a wrong approach. After discussion with legal counsel, we pushed through several failed attempts. I just think it makes sense for us to put it all in one place and to set that policy decision. I understand setting the policy drives us in one of 2 ways, and I think trying to do it with a stacked motion is also complicated. So that's what I'm going to bring it back to that simple question. I think it really came down to which way would you like CTC to go. So
And that's what this motion is. All right. Hearing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Alderman Williams. Macias. Went.
Nay.
Timian.
Aye.
Moyer. O'Brien. Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
5 ayes, 3 nays. Motion passes.
So that concludes our broadband discussion of the evening, and we are now at revenue enhancing programs and projects. Mr. Warren.
Just a clarification.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Talbot.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, so I'll be quiet.
Real quick, do we have, hearing what we said,
Okay, so,
a timeline?
Hang on,
right? Yeah,
just hang on.
okay.
Is there a kind of a timeline on when we should suspect, I mean, CTC obviously does this, is this a 1 week, is this a 3 month, is, you know, what are we talking about this negotiation period? And then how detailed does that come back for us to discuss the provisions?
You heard the
So
question.
I did hear the question, thank you, it's a good question. There are other issues other than the one discussed tonight, which was undergrounding versus aerial. So we want to have a chance to sit down tomorrow and go through, set up calls with MetroNet and with staff and with Bob. And, you know, we want to go through carefully all of the different aspects here, besides the underground versus aerial. So give us, you know, it will take some period of weeks, but I want to give a better answer after talking with President of our company and Bob and reaching out to MetroNet in the coming days.
Thanks, sir. Okay.
Thank you. We'll be in touch tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have a pleasant evening.
There are a variety of informational sheets here.
Sure. First of all, thank you for your patience. Today, staff and I have did some brainstorming of our own, a very broad topic that we refer to here as revenue enhancement programs and projects. And that's what it is, it's called revenue enhancement versus cost savings, right? You can go down both roads. Tonight, talk about revenue enhancement. Some of the things that we discussed at the staff level, that we do have some specific programs that do generate revenue for the city. And the question would be, do we go back and review those, explore those, the rates that we charge for services we provide, to our neighbors? That's really what it comes down to our neighbors. Moline being the largest city on this side of the river, and probably the most affluent, we do impact all of them with whatever service that we see that they give us. Then we talked about what are we not doing today, what would we like to do in the future looking forward for new revenue. Of course, solar power is, the clean energy world. Do we enter the clean energy world, and do we do what we shut down? Solar power obviously is something that we put into our strategic plan. EV charging stations, another hot topic that is publicly surfaced now. I want to kind of go through these with you one by one. Staff is here to weigh in on issues, starting of course with the water. We have a new government agreement with the IGA. Solar providing them much needed water to support their existing community and their future growth, which is really important for those boundaries, which we have where it needs to be created a line that establishes where that line would be for us, to be east of our limits, which is beyond shelter and so the water IGA facilities, in addition to what we're doing with Tony and working on change chairs. About 6 million gallons a day in excess capacity, yes, on a daily basis. And we pointed out before that there's a lot of people who need much work, like the county, we work, and how we are today. When the industry disappeared, the water demand disappeared, we had some capacity in itself present. And now we have to decide what we do with that water. Sometimes suggested bottling that water, some of them are being distributed that water, perhaps even to our neighbors, not commercially. We talked about wholesale sale of the water facilities. We talked about wholesale sale of Oak Valley. We don't have that. Whether it be held wells on the south side of the Rock River, problematic shallow wells, deep shallow wells. So we're exploring options with our neighbors as well as the incorporated area south of the report. Looking for ways to use water, particular subdivisions that are currently in existence. They have community, small community wells. Those community wells are in the process of reaching useful life. Some of them are failing with water quality standards and issues that they have to meet. So it's not simple as the one there are a lot of the smaller communities. But we've reached out to them to try and see what that direction is. Our numbers are higher than we would like in terms of extending the water and sewer. Sometimes they can do it without less cost than we can do it for because it's a lot. And I'll give you one example. Okay. Just in the west of the Gulf Coast, just south of the harbor. They reached out to Tony from Sherry Valley. I can do it again.
Yeah, so there's a 16 home subdivision or whatever you said in the EPA set their criteria for the definition of a public water system. The limit threshold is 15 houses.
benefit to the city is that the property directly to the east of them is in the city, and it's city owned, so it's under control of the city. So if they were to connect and we were able to work an agreement with them, it would be 16 instantaneous new person. We'd be within the city's corporate boundaries. So I think that the cops wanting to relay here is that we want to make these utility extensions and utility agreements in a way that benefit the city, not just the utilities.
Right. And sometimes you have to spend money to make money, even as a local government. And oftentimes, development first, development responsible extend, municipal water, municipal sewer to their property across their entire frontage based on local ordinances that you have on the books. Sometimes they have to go past property that they don't own. Very often, they capture agreements when the other property comes in. It's very good process. In our case, we had numbers of about $24,000 per home, and they were looking at, I believe, eight. Looking at 8. Well, that's a big delta. 8. 24 is a big delta. If you're one of those homeowners, you're not going to want to fight that off. You don't have to, even if you extend it, like 10 years, but then make payments over 10 years, 20 years. That's one of the challenges we're going to have with those areas with existing residential, as opposed to just raw land development, which is also one of the topics. So, that is our challenge. Sure, that obviously we want to grow. I mean, we need to grow. We need that population base. We don't want to shrink. We actually want to grow.
Another concern though is providing services to those areas. Water and sewer is one of them. My fire folks and my police folks now have to respond out there, and it's not quite as easy as it is just putting a fiber run some water. So sanitation services, stuff like that. They come into the city, other services have to go out there. Consideration of police, fire.
Absolutely. I know both chiefs are here. They can speak to it. I know we do have agreements with all of our surrounding communities for fire service. You can speak to.
Small enclaves that I think that are already surrounded by city property will probably pose as much of a challenge for us as it would a great distance.
So the response times wouldn't be a concern.
We're not going over 8 minutes. The standard, national standard. Police service.
I'm probably a little different from police. I think in some pockets or within the municipal boundaries now would not be a challenge, but massive expansion at some point would be a challenge. Probably like it would be for public works or even the fire department in some sense. Initially, expanding to uninhabited ground would not be an issue. But as those are developed, let's just say there is significant development, we would probably have to add another means because of not getting into the weeds and all that. But the officer that controls John Deere Road would be the same officer who would also be responsible for south of the airport. So at minimum, we would have to add 6 officers.
Is there the possibility, this, I appreciate that, and it's been kind of probably jumping in any substantial amount, but is there possibilities for, because right now, those I'm assuming are covered by county, that there can be an intergovernmental agreement for coverage, or is there something that prohibits a municipality from doing that as a stepping stone until we get to the critical mass?
Well, the sheriff's department specifically covers other municipalities. They have agreements with Rapid City, Fort Myron. They charge them for think they would be in the same situation that we would be, is to provide proper service that an area would, and I think it would depend on what it is. If you're building residential homes, that's gonna take a little while, we're gonna get some advanced notice, and probably need to start hiring. If you're starting to build a water park, a retail outlet, and bars and stuff like that, again, it's gonna take a while. But those all have different response needs. So if this blows up into another, downtown, say, and I would imagine that would be the same with fire, you've got structures to protect and things like that. I don't think that they would receive the same response. So the county is divided into 3 zones, and that would probably be diluted even further for the county to respond to Knoxville Road for a huge residential neighborhood or retail outlet. The response time would be enormous.
Yeah, I guess what I'm looking for is we added 16 homes out there, and the concern is we got to hire 6 new staff for those 16 homes. Is there some place in between we would say, hey, as part of the annexation agreement, you can come in, but up front, you're not going to get Moline police coverage. You're going to get basically the same coverage you had in the county, and we sign a IGA with the county that says, hey, just keep with these guys, we'll pay you whatever, because they're going to pay taxes in the city. And then, you kind of start to grow, and then once we kind of hit that right number, then it makes sense to hire 6 people to build a fire department out there, however.
We have some responsibility out there now. If you're talking about 16 homes, the volume isn't, I think but I think that is the trigger that you all know that as that is starting to build out, we need to start the process of adding municipal infrastructure, police, fire, that has to be ongoing as that is happening. I think 16 homes, it's highly unlikely that's going to get 300. But 16 becomes 32, becomes a gas station, becomes, right? And that's what we do.
Thank you.
I don't think it's all yay or nay thing as far as the county. I mean, they'll respond, right?
Yes.
If they're out there and they get a call, they're going to respond. I mean, whatever the police department happens to be, I think that's how it comes into the radio system.
Yeah, we have mutual aid agreements with everybody,
That's
both sides of the river. I mean, if the world was coming unraveled, someone's going to respond. Island, county, us. So, I mean, in the short term, there will be service.
Okay.
So,
Any other-
order,
yes,
order
sorry.
growth and development, I'm sorry.
Margaret, stop.
So in addition to other comments, remember that it was union issues. So any area that is part of the city, the union is, union employees, police officers, firefighters, are primarily responsible for responding to those calls. It's their work.
And for that, move right on that to, again, wastewater, like water has a number of different IGAs. Obviously, pulled out any small name, they're a long-standing customer of the city. Will continue to be long-standing customer of the city. They're going to just pay them. Tony and I had the opportunity to meet with the president of our Charles and Paul Valley last week, I believe Friday, along with Ryan. And we went out, introduced themselves, had a great meeting, talked about the boundary agreement. They're not looking necessarily to change the boundary agreement. They do have some ideas that they would like to see minor changes, but they're not pushing on. They're not much more friendly meeting. we are with the IGA, I see anything on wastewater.
I don't think so, other than the fact that, good call, you'll, Ansel Blank is working on an IGA that will come in front of you hopefully within the next month or so. Initially, the agreement would be for us to just provide staff right there where we're looking at facilities. But they're facing the same issues that we're facing in South Bend. They have the exact same permit language in their BDS permit, and so they'll have questions that they'll have to answer. And part of the agreement that we've made with them is that we provide them technical support and guidance on how to navigate through that. And it's not beyond the realm of possibilities that wastewater, it might be cheaper to convey that wastewater away from their existing plant to another plant.
Is there anything still hanging out with the IGA with us without starting to do that?
Yes, it's very near the end, and that was part of the reason why Bob and Moline were at that.
All right, next, so as we get into this utility rate study discussion, which we've had before, the rates that we had, what's this, how long?
For wastewater, since there has been no changes or adjustments to the rates since 2018 for water, drinking water 2014, and stormwater 2005.
Right, 2005. Like, some of these rates are newer, and it should keep pace with inflation. Every time I've done a rate study, they claim to have people do those rate studies for you. They always come back and see what inflation. Yeah, when you go, walking out, it's going to be 2 bucks. Everybody's going to go crazy at the other side. So they always come back with the same recommendation, assuming our consultants are good for you. That's what you do with that. Like everything else, cost of goods and services go up and down. And then you don't have to go ahead and do this rate study up to the month, so you can break laws to review, just ensure that it got the rates. The stormwater utility is a big issue. We have some great drainage basins in the city because of our topography. We discharge a significant amount of water from the water down to the ravines and out to the Rock River and out to the Mississippi. And yet we have a rate, we have a system that's not financially sound, it's not supported. I mean, if we do anything, we have to address this issue. And we have to find a way to ensure that we have the resources to finance the improvements necessary to do it. And just working on one drain basin, which is 100 acres, roughly, which is the one that your house has. And that particular drainage basin is about a $3.5 million project in order for the property to do it. And yeah, it's a project that also controls the development of our industry property. And they're waiting on us, right? They need the answers. So as we work with, and it also impacts the Amtrak money, because even they are studying our drainage basin and see how our drainage basins impact their rail operation. Because they're required to, as part of their big environmental impact. So this is one of those areas where I think that we might really have to take a additional revenue. How to actively bring that about. Drainage basin by drainage basin might be different from one of the next, or maybe universal across the city of Redwood. That's an area that we want to think about.
My recollection is that stormwater utility, unlike water and sewer, is not a true standalone enterprise fund. It's not covering all of its costs, right? It's augmented somehow a little bit by the general fund.
There are no general fund dollars formally flowing into this. It is an enterprise fund. However, it is informally being subsidized by the city.
Chargebacks for like your time, Carol's time, finance, they're all allotted to the stormwater, like water and sewer. stormwater touches every CIP project. It's important. That utility is
And if we go down that route, I think then to the point of we had given direction to staff to come back with updates to our stormwater code that makes some of the people who are most responsible for some of our issues actually accountable for the runoff that we have. I just don't want a situation where we make the easy thing like, hey, we'll just spread this out and tax everybody and take money out from all of our residents, rather than some of the harder issues of like, hey, you're the one that's causing a lot of this problem. Things have to improve, and so I wouldn't even consider that until we get our house in order.
one last question.
Yes.
Carol, I noticed that sanitation is listed under there. You have been reminding us occasionally with sanitation and something like that. Is that still a concern, or since it didn't make the list?
If you recall, in the budget last year, we did to allocate $250,000 each year. Last year, this year, we're $500,000. So it's fine now with that 500,000, but we set it up with that fund got to be general fund for that. So yes, we do need to look at those things. It's on listed regulated utilities. I know that Moline has looking at one thing was talking to the arsenal, he was looking at alternative places that potentially that they could service, but he's not coming out with the recommendation.
When was the last time those rates?
We just moved
We did recycling. He's not solid waste.
Yeah, Mr. Lane.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but we were also told that because of this, so much was going to go to recycling, it's going to be our tipping fees are way down. That's what we did. So the subsidized over to kind of give us over this 2-year pump or whatever, was some of that to pay down some debt service, and I thought part of that was we had to borrow some money for some totes and changes.
I mean, there is debt service as part of that on those cards. Yeah, but that's 0% loan.
But the cash flow now is not being, you don't project that next year to be subsidized, or?
No, it's going to be subsidized. The 500,000 is carrying us, and it's just a quick now. It gave us time to try to do that.
Thank you. Can you remind us, I know it was, I believe it was in our July sets, but when the new rates.
This particular rate study?
Hoping to talk to Bob about that.
We'll see in the next month then.
Yeah,
Sooner than later.
if Bob approves, I would like to bring it to, during the fee review meeting.
Number 4, and this one's really great, food service IPAs, people who, we call them restaurants here in the Quad Cities. When I saw who the customers were, I thought, wow, how much you guys have to come and care for us too much. Because you look at this list, I mean, Rock Island, Arsenal, Bull Valley, Hillsdale, Fort Fire, Rapid City, Riverdale, Black Hawk Valley, Rock Island County. So this fire, so is PWA, and Slayer. But if you look at it, those are organizations that we actually provide cannabis services to. Hence the reason why the mechanics are so important to this organization, why their salaries need to be adjusted, and why they need to see what we become that important. always north of $100 an hour. So, just saying. I mean, this, at your cost, I say that it sounds like it's best, but the reality is our hardest thing was losing mechanics because of the hourly rate we compensate them at, right? And they're going, and now we're going to stabilize that. That's not forever because people are doing jobs all the time for greater wealth. You might want to look at increasing those rates so that we can pay these people a better market so that they don't go to a need or they go into the private sector. This food for thought, we will do the budget process, we may come back with some suggestions on how to adjust those rates.
Yes, question.
Are we all caught up with outstanding accounts receivable? That, a couple of years ago, there was some, but that not seen.
Yeah, the AR rate is a very minimal amount. That's
Right. Yeah. A few years ago, I guess.
She's good at collecting. So that takes care of kind of existing revenue, I did with sanitation salaries. Takes us then to solar, as you know, I mean, clean energy, so everything is moving with clean energy. We like that or not, we support or endorse that or not, politically or otherwise, it's irrelevant. It's where the world is moving to, the future of fossil fuels. We're never going to replace fossil fuels. It's not possible. But clean energy is where people are going from providing electricity to communities across the country and around the globe, actually. So this, there is such a wealth of information on this that we want to get you is not 300-400 pages of information. Like, just kind of give you a snapshot of what's going on. And we talked about solar for municipalities, whether it's solar that goes on the roof of municipal buildings, whether it's solar we allow in residential neighborhoods, on homes, they can obviously become clean energy homes, whether it's new development where it's part of new construction, it's even required on homes, whether it's a solar farm, the city somehow able to independently or with private sector partners. There's a whole world of opportunity out there. We've got a lot of opportunities out there for to do something. So I think again, the legacy of solar. Most people aren't doing it. I've thought about it, but you go out west, solar farms are growing up. They're going out pretty rapidly. Before we realize the financial things that there's multiple revenue streams that come in off of solar. It's not just simply energy, right? It's got different significant streams. I'm not going to say that your property is not going to do that. You can generate a lot more money, probably from solar energy than property tax. So, going forward, it's one of those key goals, it's something that once the system is on board, providing you help really involved with the operation of the city, which attract good people to it. So that we want to know the city. People to the table much greater than I am, and to actually help them educate us to make informed decisions about how we go forward. Amending our comprehensive plan to allow for something like that. Amending our zoning code, permitting processes, both our ordinances. We were all in or not. That was the land level for where we're at right now.
Thank you. This is one that I initially, when we talked about the strategic plan, I wanted to see, and it didn't make the top list, so I'm glad to see it at the very top here.
I forgot that.
Yeah, but I'm happy to see it. But at the time, there was discussions about a federal big back better language, obviously, anywhere, and not just wait patiently. This really, we have to take our own initiative and, it's up to us to make these things happen. So I'm really happy to see it out there. Just in savings alone, there could be substantial savings, for us, but, since then, these quantums, that you talk about have come to mind and, yeah, I'm just happy to see it there. And it also sends a good signal that this is a community that cares about the environment as well.
Very true.
I would like in the future, make sure to research, what other things you can do in solar farms. And I believe you can actually have gardens, agriculture underneath the panels, et cetera. I just, multiple uses of our space as we can handle, and as our safe, et cetera, I think it's worth knowing that as we get information.
One of the big cash crops, it's not one of the big cash crops that I've been advised is cost for lavender, always uses. So a lot of places are actually growing that. Needs to cover it, basically drops down, always heat them. So, always be more.
And certainly, we agrees, great public-private partnerships on this, if we
Yes.
just going it alone on our own.
Going along would be
Sure.
it would. It could. Those are the numbers that we're trying to gather, and then the question is, locations. Obviously, locations are important. If it's a food farm, 100 acres, you have, everyone have the site. So the question is, we have the site. Start the process of gathering information, fact finding, bringing players to the table, and sure they're not. A lot of federal funds, a lot of state funds, and a lot of private dollars. Partner in, you got to share. Share with us. They can pay for all the panels. And also sell the power. So a lot of things, there's a lot of different variables to this that I'm uncovering. And in fact, it's a really nice song.
Any other questions? Solar? Now we move to new growth and development / redevelopment. Very broad title.
Just like the title itself for tonight, yeah. New growth, obviously, is what it is. It's new growth. It's everything that our company called for back in 2003, 2001. 2001. So it's my rough date. But, new growth obviously does what? Bring it's going to bring some commercial. You're probably going to have all for massive industry, all for even light industry. If you call more for neighborhood commercial, you support new rooftops. And rooftops translate into property taxes and income tax, right? So income tax, sales tax, more people being there, and all of a sudden, the mall area becomes more interesting and more valuable because people are south. There's nothing south of them, right? Not really. So they have to go north across the river to get to what is the bigger commercial area beyond the cities and the mall area. So new growth actually, some people say it never pays for itself, but in reality, sometimes it would pay for itself. So if we look at that, we need to explore residential developers. They're out there. They're still building. Not building like they were before, but they're still building. There's a housing shortage. We have our own housing shortage right now. We don't have a large volume of property. What they said, except for properties right now. So that guys like Yonkers, you know, they, it's a year, you know, these, just a cab charge, I don't know, if we're talking about cab. But the reality is that redevelopment of that is essential, no question about it. You know, that of course having the same discussion with one of our, what you going to do with it. Because, you know, those are outdated models of real estate that just don't seem to apply very well anymore. They have that issue over there, then you got redevelopment, of course, downtown, 92 or 192 into the I-74 corridor. That's gonna bring rooftops. Residential is one of the principal focuses. So if you look at downtown, and look at additional rooftops, we now have Dallas, which is about 400 roofs, 400 units. You know, that's a lot of people. A lot of people to support all the small businesses downtown, as well as businesses on the other city. And when you get out of the new big rooftops, you get more shared revenue from the state. We lost about $250 million just because we lost in the last census. So redevelopment on the one side is the focus. That's what that economic development person is commercially engaged in this recruiting alongside Ryan, policy assistant director, my office, and then of course there's downtown, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of interest happening now. People are not ignoring Moline, so very broad category, but it's what we do. It's what really pays the bills.
I'll add to what you mentioned about the mall. We had good conversations with them about this program they're using to try to jumpstart leasing in the mall, but I also have spoken with them and about reimagining what the outside, the outlots look like, right? Is there a new neighborhood? I mean, senior housing is something that we could create another neighborhood surrounding it and think more residentially versus retail. But haven't gotten back to that discussion yet, but it's a healthy one, it's a good one. And I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, obviously the mall needs a lot of help. Back in December, we had asked staff to come back with recommendations to reduce the parking requirements up and along down the John Deere corridor. It's now July. We haven't had anything. I mean, if talk about something that is prohibited is requiring all of these empty parking spots that just take up land. Talk about stormwater, all of these things that are a real issue. There have been discussions, and I appreciate maybe a neighborhood idea or something like that. There have also been discussions about converting some of that area into ball fields and kind of a outdoor. I mean, it's all graded, it's all done. Utilities, all of that stuff is all there. And if you could get then more, I guess, traffic down there with people bringing their kids, that's the stuff that's going to drive. It's the demand, people wanting to actually shop and buy things there rather than just giving free rent for a year, but nobody's going to come through your door. That doesn't make any sense at all. And so those are the things that we've been talking about, but there's just been no movement or comeback. I think that I introduced you to a developer that's talking about maybe converting one of the hotels into affordable housing and those sorts of things. Like that's the kind of thing where you have actual people there that then go and shop if we're going to do that. And again, please come back to us with some stuff on parking and those sorts of things so that we can get those spots up and running and have less restrictions so that we can get an estimated plausible. Yeah.
Research actually has done redevelopment of some of their properties in other states. Youth organization, locally organization actually have great examples where there's a mixed use development, including up there's about 84 acres over there. The inside, that
we did research Shy Battery about that methodology study. They kind of get back to us and said that that's not really a possibility. But I do have some experience in the communities that we're in where you shift the mindset from parking minimums to parking maximums. And that's really where the planning world is going. So now you do parking maximums and then you disincentivize, but if you want to go above that parking maximum, then you're going to provide landscaping, or you're going to provide more amenities, bicycle, non-motorized transportation, infrastructure. It's something that is on our list to certainly begin those discussions with the planning commission on. I don't necessarily think we can study. I've just looked at our ordinance. I think we're way over the city.
And to that point, we didn't ask for a study. We just asked for staff to come back with some changes so we could get this. I mean, this was back in December. And so I agree with you. Like when I originally heard this before you were here, oh, well, we're going to do a study. I think I sent you an email right away and said, why are we wasting money on? I agree with you.
I don't think we need a study. We've got capacity within CED. We've got professional knowledge within CED that I think we can look at it. I mean, this is not something that's new. We do a lot of those things all around the country where we install or going to more parking maximums. One caveat I will say, and I've heard, and we probably want to work with some of our real estate partners, is to ensure that we're not practicing behavior. Because we have heard from developers that say that if you put too stringent a parking maximum on, that bank won't finance it because the bank is going to say you have to have parking. So there does need to be a little bit of that. But yes, I think just first blush of looking at our ordinance, I believe it shows its age. It shows it's kind of the 100-year parking event. It's your Walmarts, your Targets. They're made for Black Friday and 2 weeks later.
And, as we look at that, I think it is something. I would request that we get a little bit of trading wheels with that presentation. That is, it's a new issue. I think I agree with you, Modern. I think that if they're, but just I would request a little bit of that kind of the explainer materials and that upfront information. However, that's the go through the process.
Whatever you want to say. Right. As you work with planning, you said you're working with planning.
We're going to start discussions.
Okay, so I know that tiny homes is on there. You did do the work on AQ that we asked you them to do. But in terms of the prioritization of these topics, please make sure you look at the timelines from what they were suggesting.
Yeah, and to that point, because I think we're working through the form-based code downtown, which most likely will have some maximum for no requirements at all.
Our current.
But we probably move to some maximums and say you can't do yes. And that's why we have talked about down this road. Now, when we talk about avenue of cities and those sorts of things, I think that becomes a little bit of a different animal because then you are adjacent to residential streets and those sorts of things. So I just wanted to make that small caveat that in our community, I think we're talking about those 3 different rounds, downtown, uptown, overtown, and then down on John Deere Road. 2 of them probably makes a lot of sense on to do it all over the place. I think we would want to hold off.
All right.
Number 3, we talked about the annexation program, but actually formalizing it. Right now, it's kind of like, well, go after, folks down here. Fruit land, that's what I said, follow. Fruit land, go down to fruit land and get it in. Well, we're working on that. We're getting people interested in it again, and realistic. We got people pushing back, saying, I'm in the county, I want to stay in the county, I don't care what somebody else is doing. I'm not coming in. So we're focusing on dealing with those pockets that we have. But then looking south and having a real formal program to get there. Orderly growth, orderly development, see side, not really happening inside that borderline. So that borderline is a little bit flexible. So we'll look at, some kind of program, strategy, more than any strategy, how we get to go the other day, gradually go to the south. Without needing 6 officers to meet. That's not gonna happen.
I just want a little clarification, and I just don't want your words to be misconstrued. The council, when we talk about these annexations, we just said, let's enforce our ordinance and the agreements we have already in place. We didn't say pick on these people and go after them or anything like that. It was merely wherever they happen to be, we were told that there were like 50 plus houses that didn't meet our ordinance, had already agreed that it should have been done, and some of them as long as 30 years ago. And so I just don't want someone to misquote you and take things completely out of context or misconstrue what would happen at council meeting or anywhere else.
So now we are working actively with two properties. They don't want to.
But the point is that they are previous agreements.
We have previous agreements that go back to the time that they were provided with the utility service, water, sewer, all for one or the other. And to this day, a lot of that has not changed. Not calculated right now, but it's kind of improvement for many of the surroundings. Hey, you give me the water, I got this, or I have some water. You're now seeing a lot of that.
Not a lot, but few and far between. Yes, especially as homes are transacted. Somebody that's using I will say up to the initial 28 that we contacted, there's a handful that are voluntary and they're going to come forward. Ryan's team is working on those, and then there's going to be some that there's going to be hearings.
Okay, thank you.
Number 4, this is one of our strategic goals, again, it's the start of the accelerator program, and that launched that, got refunded that with $100. We've already $100 cash collection, so it's a small business startup that actually take place either downtown or in the 1563 corridor, right? All of the Williams neighborhood up there, the military, right? Something up there. So we're looking at launching that program again. Startups being bought. I don't know, we got a full plate. I know, Ryan, this is something we talked about. And as well.
Yeah.
Talked about this many times.
Really, the intent is we're beginning to kind of hammer down the business. Kind of how getting out of the emergency phase, and now we're trying to figure out how we make this business stronger, how do we continue businesses, so we'll be shifting those funds. So that's Katie's working on.
Next one is an issue that, again, clean energy driven subject. Mayor and I had an opportunity to meet with Jeff Nelson. We have people from the energy with all school buses and school buses, right? He's really good at pushing those issues and funding sources. So one of their goals is to electrify the community. And one of those things is not vehicles and charging stations. There's a deficit charging stations here in the cities. We live on a corridor like 74, which is the front door to the west part of the country. People come in through that corridor. And they have to have someone to charge for electric vehicles. And now, trucks. So we're going to be working with him and others to see if we can put together a plan for Moline. Moline becomes that destination, whether it's a destination someplace downtown, like the
U.S. Conference of Mayors was a great panel session on lessons learned from other communities that have already put this EV infrastructure in place. Certainly, you know, more and more people have to engage in electric vehicle use for it to make sense to have the infrastructure, but the industry believes, and the clean energy industry believes that it's going to get there. So there were some great takeaways from that panel discussion, things to avoid, mistakes to avoid making, especially as you retrofit the older communities. And so I'm particularly looking at, you know, the new construction development and what we need in that kind of infrastructure, and the retrofitting piece in our neighborhoods, et cetera, is a whole other issue. So that's part of the conversations with that.
Mark, I don't have any intention of part of our own vehicles already discussed. So, and I guess as we're thinking about trying to go through this as a way to help defray that cost or increase that usefulness, wondering if there are ways if we need an infrastructure for our own charging vehicles, we would set them in a place where they would also be able to function as the pay. So that our, rather than us build, I mean, we already have some inside public works, I know, somewhere else, but rather than saying, oh, we're going to have all walled garden for our, we should always have some, sure, but we could use the ones that are kind of out there in the environment, which would help defray some of that startup cost by saying like, oh, hey, we didn't install one in public works, we need this one. I know that's a more complicated issue, but if we can make that make sense.
And one second, Mr. Went, being very strategic about where these go in the city, in combination with what's happening with Metrolink, where they want to put them in. I have private parties, business owners who are interested in having them in their locations for a variety of reasons. And then there's places like, where do you want people, or where do we know people are going to be for several hours? Riverside Park, right? You're putting in a new parking area, maybe we need to consider like, where would we put any EV infrastructure? So there's many more conversations to have on both sides.
Yeah, and I think that's like.
Just Schmidt, I thought you were pointing.
No, Alderman Schmidt's on point. Yeah, like maybe out here by the police department, so if there's a city vehicle to use it during the week and all that stuff, but then have it paid on the weekends and at night. And so do we know how many of these, other than the ones that we have, are actually in the room?
One over here.
No, charging station.
Oh, I think like EVs. There's not many. There's just a supercharger station over that before. In City of Moline, there is, I believe, a couple of car dealerships that have like level 1 or level 2. Slow chargers. That's about it.
So right now, there's not.
Yeah.
For the public, there's.
And to that point, there is a sign, we talked about in our environmental solutions group, there's a sign up by 74 saying, this is the charging area. It's because IDOT wants it to be.
Yeah.
IDOT wants it.
Yeah. That's
Here,
airport, right?
question. It says here that these things take 1 to 2 hours to charge. Is that what our vehicles take? Superchargers would do that. Very high voltage. Mine is a very small battery, so I think the Tesla superchargers you can get 80% in 30 minutes.
Right.
Even some newer ones you can get it
Yeah.
So well, you need a lot of these. I mean, until the technology catches up and they can charge them up.
You need a lot of people running cars.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah.
But
When
we
the
can
cars
afford
go.
those EVs.
Well, a lot of these you can charge at home as well. And so that is the benefit of them. However, if you go through your 200 miles or whatever and you're at tax layer because you drove in for a concert, this is what you're talking about.
Right. And that, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff Nelson has a ton of information on this variety of times for charging and where you want to place them for varied amounts of time.
It's definitely kind of, I mean, to to me, it's interesting to see somebody drive across country and say, well, I gotta pull over for 2 hours, you know, on my itinerary, charge my battery, you know, maybe, I mean, that's a long time. So the technology probably needs to advance somewhat.
Well, the other thing too, something, even the home building industry, as they build new homes, I mean, they're wiring them to 20 superchargers right into the garages, you know, as opposed to retrofitting existing homes, trying to run 2.9 houses, not cheap. But that is what become a requirement by the building community. You have to make sure you got 220 installed, and that people will be using actually connecting them.
Mr. Macias.
And what you're gonna see is business in the way is a grocery store wants you to shop there and you have that clientele that can afford the Tesla is what they're gonna install. Same with hotels. They want that clientele, they're gonna install them. So I think we still are down the way and there's by then the technology will improve very quickly because they're constantly improving. So but it's great to get all this information now and stay on top of it. But this is, I think we'll start thinking of it.
It brings us to the end. On my list, that's Canada's dispensary, which you know. Did I miss something? Oh, I'm sorry, I took my glasses up and I checked it off. So Airbnb and hotel tax, yeah, we don't tax it. They're not paying, from what I understand. Do you know anything about it?
Yes, we already passed this in 2019. It's in our code.
Yeah.
Just nobody's actually.
Nobody's like,
Yeah, it was April 9th. It was 3001-2019. That's why I would like to get these things. But no, we took care of this back in 2019. It's on the books. That's an easy one.
Understood. Not being polite.
That's how I like to work. That's how I like to work. Yeah.
So it does take us to Canada.
Yes, it does.
So, as you know, there are 4 zones that the council approved some time ago, and we are working very deliberately with all these projects. That project is moving forward. I expect, Ryan, correct me, that probably sometime in August, September timeframe.
Yeah, scheduled a public hearing, planning commission August 10th.
That's one dispensary.
If you say the Aldi property, do you mean Golden property, the old Aldi? Like, okay, okay.
The old one.
Don't want to buy my house.
They're going to be inside the church.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we are working on that. Those are huge. Reports, first year of operation, full year milestone. So it is a huge revenue generator. Our limitation is they're located right on the corridor. We're going to capture all that traffic. So, rather than Moline, I'm not going to want to stop right here.
You say planning commission August 10th.
Depending on if they can get it past that night, they should be back to all in August.
Yes, Mr. O'Brien.
Talk about parking problems. Are we gonna need to
No, that's gotta be part. It hasn't been about.
You see one on Island, it's.
Well, there's a tracking study that is required.
That's underway right now.
Okay.
But I think.
Yes.
The consultant's question. We're not proceeding yet, but
They're running that through the engineering department, right? That's all I have for tonight. Thank you very much.
Any other thoughts on new revenue generating streams from the council? Okay, move to miscellaneous business. I have one invitation to share with you all that I'm not able to, I will be out of town. But this Saturday, Larry Smith, the secretary of the Dora Lodge, invites any of the council to come to their dedication ceremony of their new home. So it's at Saturday at 1 p.m. Dora Lodge. It's permanent home now, 1520 47th Avenue in Moline. Yeah. And the only other item is that the preparations for Moline 150 continue to go well. Like the website needs to have a little bit more on it, more information, what's happening that week, etc. But nothing is behind that I'm aware of. So that's all I have to report, Mr. Williams.
Nothing wrong.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I know that we just passed chapter 2 last week, and it made me start to question if we as a council should just bite the bullet and adopt Robert's rules instead of having our own version of it. And I don't know if there's appetite for this body to just do that instead of continue to use it unofficially, so that we can just clean it up, because we are effectively using it. So, I guess with that, I'll make a motion to direct that to bring the proposal to us.
Second.
By Alderman Simeon, second by Alderman Weinstein. Discussion. Hearing none. Oh, yes.
Only that in the adoption or the discussion of that, would actually a little explanation of what that changes, and specifically what that would supersede or need to take things out from our current procedure, just as a matter of
For that illegal. Absolutely.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Margaret. Any further? Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Walter.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Schmidt. Staff. Any other staff? No, hearing none. All right, any further public comment? Yes, sir.
All right, I don't know really where to start.
You can go to that podium right there. Can you just tell us your name, please?
I'm Craig Logan. I'm a newer resident of Moline. Last August, moved from Chicago. Thanks to the mayor, met early on in my time here at the Department of Development, local fund committee. That continues to get 0 applications. Anyways, a lot of comments here. I don't know if there's any feedback just listening to me talk, but BE funding, BEAD for broadband, I don't know if that's something that the council's been made aware of, or if the state is looking to provide financing for broadband infrastructure. There's $42 billion from the government. Now the states are required to apply for that. You can't, as a municipality, apply for that funding. That may be something for thought as well to increase broadband access to local citizens. I happen to know the CEO of a local, not local, but a Illinois-based solar company, sales and installation. Happy to make a connection to anybody that is interested in having him come speak either virtually or in person. Former client of mine when I was a client, my friend Chase. Some other thoughts. The city of Milwaukee, as you're looking at increasing revenue, I was there last weekend. My brother lives up there. The county actually runs and operates several community care gardens. These are permanent structures, and then there's a traveling one that stays for 19 days and moves around the county. County owns it, operates it. It's usually sponsored by a local brewery. But from my understanding, that is a revenue producing thing for the. There's I think 5 permanent ones, and then throughout the as thanks to the mall. I thought a beer garden would be a perfect place or the mall would be a perfect place to reimagine what that mall looks like. There's that dead space that's kind of near where all the food area is at. If you build something that's family friendly, perhaps you provide a stage for some music. I think that could be a use for that mall space. And if you look at other mall areas, again, Milwaukee, I'm a Wisconsin, born and raised, Bayshore Mall. Write that one down. That is an indoor-outdoor mall. It's converted from an indoor to an outdoor mall. And they do have some living spaces there as well. So when you think about trying to provide some additional use for folks, it's kind of one stone. We've got a lot of other stuff here on the table for now.
Thank you very much. And thank you for just so the council knows, I did just talk to another revolving loan fund member this week, Mr. Evans, and we do have some work there to do, Mr. Beacon, that we need to get the small business accelerator stuff going. People headed that, but I also am well aware of the fact that, like even by state commission has people not taking advantage of this, their revolving loan fund, $400,000 been available for the last, and sometimes it's hard because there's so many requirements on these funds, but we do need to narrow these. Thank you. Executive session, I'm not aware of any. Thank you. Need a motion to adjourn? Second by Alderman Macias. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
Everybody.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So here's everything else.
My name's